Type Harley Benton versus Fender into any search bar, and you will find the same sentence, repeated by hundreds of different players in hundreds of different words. It kills it in bang for the buck. A house brand nobody had heard of a decade ago is now the default answer whenever someone asks for a bass under $300, and a recent blind test where professional bassists guessed prices with their eyes covered has quietly passed 500,000 views, with more than one working pro guessing $1,500 for an instrument that turned out to cost $200. Today we test that claim properly. Not vibes, not brand loyalty, receipts. What Harley Benton actually is, what real reviewers hear when the marketing is switched off, exactly where Fender still honestly wins, and the one uncomfortable catch almost nobody mentions when they tell you to buy the cheap one. Here is the plan. Part 1. What Harley Benton actually is, the factory story behind the price tag, because the answer is stranger and more honest than either fanboy camp admits. Part 2. The evidence, real reviewers, real blind tests, what actual ears report when they cannot see the headstock logo. Part 3. Where Fender still wins honestly, because 100 years of brand equity is a real thing, not a marketing trick. Part 4. The catch, the one this comparison almost never gets, that changes the calculation depending on where you live and how you buy gear. And then the bracket verdict. At the exact same money, which one should actually go in your cart? Stay with me for Part 2 especially, because one of the professional bassists you are about to hear guessed a Harley Benton's price wrong by over $1,000 on camera. And the reason he got it wrong is the entire argument of this video in one moment. And keep an ear open for the catch in Part 4, because it is the single detail that determines whether this whole comparison even applies to you. A quick honest note before we start. Neither brand paid for this video, and every clip you're about to see from other creators is used muted for commentary, with the creator and channel named on screen, because their reactions are the evidence, not filler. The links below are plain product links, no affiliate games, no markup. And because buying right is a method, not a list, the complete buyer's guide, every gold mine and money trap from this channel as one honest map, is linked in the description. Now let's get into it. Part 1. What Harley Benton actually is. Here is the fact that ends most arguments before they start. Harley Benton is the in-house instrument brand of Thomann, one of the largest music retailers on earth, and it is sold exclusively through Thomann, nowhere else new. That single fact explains almost everything about the price. There is no dealer network taking a cut, no distributor markup, no separate marketing budget buying magazine ads, because the retailer and the brand are the same company. Production happens across a network of roughly 20 factories spread through China, Indonesia and Vietnam, the same manufacturing regions, and in some cases, genuinely the same production facilities that build mid-range instruments for household names, because modern guitar factories build for many brands under one roof, and the difference between one bass and another often lives in the spec sheet Thomann writes. Not in a different building. Fender, meanwhile, is the opposite structure on purpose. A 70-plus-year-old American company with real dealer networks in nearly every country, dedicated factories, decades of artist endorsements, and a name that is, itself, a documented driver of resale value, something we will return to. Neither structure is a scam. They are simply two entirely different answers to the same question. How do you get a bass into a player's hands? One optimizes the entire chain for price. The other optimizes for brand, consistency, and reach. The honest sentence for Part 1. You are not comparing two guitar companies. You are comparing a retailer's efficiency against a legacy brand's equity, and both are real value, just not the same kind. Part 2. The evidence, because claims from a bass channel are worth exactly nothing without real ears attached. Start with the video that put this exact question in front of 500,000 viewers. A bass channel blindfolded working professional bassists and had them guess the price of instrument after instrument by feel and sound alone. One bass came up, a jazz-style build, and the panel's guesses ranged as high as $1,500. The reveal, it was a Harley Benton, $200. The reaction on camera was not embarrassment, it was respect. One pro saying, on the record, It feels expensive, another admitting he would now buy one himself. That is not this channel's opinion. That is 500,000 people watching a real, unscripted price-guessing result happen on camera. Move to a channel that lives entirely inside the bass world, reviewing dozens of Harley Benton basses on real gigs and real recordings. Their reactions run the full, honest range. What's wrong with this one? Videos sitting right next to, why is this bass so popular? Videos, because the brand's quality control is not uniform, it is a genuine lottery. The same lottery we have documented on every budget brand this channel has ever tested, Sire included. And a third creator spent an entire video doing nothing but debunking the myths around where these instruments are actually built and by whom. The honest conclusion being that the factory conspiracy talk online is mostly noise, and the real story is the boring one. Efficient sourcing, not secret ownership. And here is the detail that makes the evidence airtight instead of just favorable. One reviewer, tired of the accusation that manufacturers quietly send YouTubers hand-picked premium units to inflate review scores, bought a Harley Benton anonymously through a friend, no free unit, no relationship with the brand, specifically to test whether the honest retail lottery experience matched the polished review unit experience. The instrument that arrived held up on camera, unedited, which is about as close to a controlled experiment as this hobby ever gets. And it is the single strongest piece of evidence in this entire video because it directly tests the exact accusations skeptics make. Added up, and the evidence points the same direction from 4 independent angles. The sound gap at this exact price point is small enough to fail blind tests regularly. The build quality is a genuine lottery rather than a guarantee. The origin story is mundane, not scandalous, and even an anonymously purchased non-review unit held up under scrutiny. Part 3. Where Fender still wins, honestly, because a channel that only tears down one side is not being fair, it is picking a team. Resale value is the biggest one, and it is not close. A used Fender at any tier holds a meaningfully higher percentage of its price than a used house brand instrument because the name itself carries recognition in every used market on earth, a fact this channel has documented across our used bass episodes. Dealer access is the second. If something goes wrong, a Fender has service centers, authorized techs, and a parts supply chain in nearly every country, while a Harley Benton repair outside a return window means shipping back to one retailer in Germany, which is a real logistical cost some players cannot absorb. Upper tier consistency is the third. Once you climb into Fender's professional and ultra lines, the quality control lottery genuinely tightens, hand in hand with the price, in a way a budget-focused house brand's higher tiers do not always match rung for rung. And the fourth, the one spreadsheets cannot capture. Walking into a rehearsal or a session with a name every other musician in the room instantly recognizes is a real social and professional signal. Not a delusion, and pretending that has zero value would be its own kind of dishonesty. The honest sentence for part 3, Fender is not selling you a better guitar at every price point. It is selling you 100 years of infrastructure and recognition around the guitar, and at certain moments in a working musician's life, that infrastructure is worth real money. Before part 4, one honest word on the wood itself, because materials talk gets thrown around loosely on both sides of this argument. Reviewers consistently note the house brand using genuinely decent tone woods for the price, Canadian maple, ash, and mahogany turning up on models where a decade ago you would have expected the cheapest laminate available, and the hardware, tuners, bridges, pot quality has climbed noticeably in the same period, to the point where several reviewers now compare it favorably against instruments from far more famous names one tier up. That does not mean every part is equal. Pickups remain the most common upgrade path on both cheap Fenders and cheap house brand instruments alike, and that is not a knock on either. It is simply where budget electronics live at every brand on earth, ours included in past episodes. The honest sentence, wood and hardware quality has genuinely converged over the last decade, which is precisely why the blind tests in part 2 keep landing closer than either brand's marketing wants you to expect. Part 4, the catch almost nobody mentions. Availability and geography change this entire comparison, and most videos comparing these two brands never say it out loud. Harley Benton is a Thomann exclusive, which means in much of Europe, where Thomann ships fast and cheap with a famously generous return policy, the value case is close to unbeatable. Outside that zone, in North America especially, the instrument is either unavailable through normal retail or arrives with shipping and import costs that quietly erase a meaningful slice of the price advantage that made the comparison interesting in the first place. This is the single most common reason online arguments about these two brands go in circles. An American player and a German player are frequently discussing two completely different purchasing realities without realizing it. The honest question before you compare a single spec: can you actually buy, return, and service this instrument easily from where you live? If the answer is no, every other point in this video is academic. One more layer before the verdict, because generic brand talk only goes so far. The actual spec sheets, model to model, at the exact same recipe. In the classic jazz bass shape, the house brand's Vintage Series instrument and Fender's own budget line both ship with alder or basswood bodies, maple necks, and rosewood or maple boards, close enough on paper that the differences live entirely in fret finishing and electronics quality, exactly where our reviewer evidence says the lottery lives too. In the precision-style shape, both camps offer a kit build option for players who want to assemble and fret level their own instrument, a genuinely unique offering neither Fender nor its budget sibling provides. And it deserves credit as its own category rather than a direct competitor. And in short scale, both brands now field a sub-30-inch option, clearly aimed at the same beginner and small-handed player our channel has recommended short scales to before, at prices close enough that the deciding factor is, once again, availability in your region, not the instrument itself. The pattern holds everywhere we looked. Spec sheets converge hard at this price, and the deciding factors live outside the wood entirely. Now the bracket verdict, the same money, side by side honestly. At right around $250, a Harley Benton in Fender's classic recipes goes head-to-head with Fender's own entry-level Squire lines, not the Player Series. And here the house brand frequently wins on raw hardware and finish quality for the money, backed by the reviewer evidence in Part 2. Step up to Fender's actual Player Series, roughly $400 to $500, and the comparison tightens considerably. You are now paying real money for the badge, the resale value, and Fender's own quality baseline. And whether that premium is worth it depends entirely on which of Part 3's 4 factors matters to you personally. And if your budget is genuinely fixed at Harley Benton, money with zero flexibility, the honest advice from this channel is the same advice we give about every budget brand. Accept the quality control lottery consciously, check the specific model's reviewer track record before buying, and lean on Thomann's return policy as your insurance. Because in this specific comparison, the safety net actually exists and is genuinely good. Before we wrap up, the 3 questions, brand versus brand edition. Question 1, can you hear the problem? If you cannot tell a $250 Fender recipe instrument from a name brand one in a blind test, and the evidence in this video suggests most people genuinely cannot, the sound is not the deciding factor for you, something else is, and you deserve to know which one. Question 2, real fault or sold feeling? Brand loyalty in either direction, Team Fender or Team Harley Benton, is a feeling, and feelings are allowed to matter to you, but they are not facts. And this video tried to hand you the facts separately from the feelings so you can combine them honestly. And question 3, have you done the cheap things first? A budget instrument from either brand, properly set up using the 5 steps from our setup episode, will outperform a neglected instrument from either brand at triple the price every single time. One last practical note before the verdict, aimed specifically at anyone about to place an order tonight, check the return window and the restocking terms before you check the price on either brand. Thomann's return policy is famously generous within Europe, often 30 days, no questions, which is exactly why the quality control lottery matters less than it sounds like it should. A bad unit becomes a minor inconvenience, not a financial loss. Fender's return terms run through whichever dealer sold it to you, which means they vary, sometimes significantly, And a bad experience with an unrelated retailer's return policy gets unfairly blamed on the brand itself. Read the actual policy on the actual page you are about to buy from every time, regardless of logo, because a great instrument with a terrible return policy and a mediocre instrument with a great one can trade places in real risk without a single spec sheet changing. So here is the honest verdict. Harley Benton is not a scam, and it is not a secret. It is a large retailer using its own scale to strip out every layer of cost that does not touch the wood or the wiring, and the reviewer evidence says that strategy genuinely works at the price. Fender is not overpriced nostalgia. It is 100 years of infrastructure, consistency, and resale value that becomes worth real money the moment your career or your gig actually depends on it. Neither fact cancels the other out. Buy Harley Benton if your buying zone favors it and you accept the honest lottery. Buy Fender if the badge, the resale, or the dealer network genuinely matters to your specific situation. And whichever one you choose, run it through the 5-step setup before you decide it was a mistake. Because at this exact price bracket, the setup gap between a great purchase and a regretted one is usually bigger than the gap between the two brands. Tell me in the comments, have you owned both, and could you actually tell them apart blind? And if you are outside Europe and have real experience with Harley Benton shipping, returns, or service, tell the story, because part 4 of this video needs your real numbers more than it needs another opinion. Everything is linked in the description, including the buyer's guide with the complete map of gold mines and money traps. Subscribe for honest, no-hype truth about bass gear, and I would be genuinely glad to have you along for the ride.